Aloha, and welcome back to Awakening to the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle. I have the beautiful Miss Emilee Saldaya here from Freebirth Society. Welcome, Emilee. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read just a short bio of Emilee for everyone who's not familiar with her. Emilee is the trailblazing leader and founder of Freebirth Society. She was a doula for over 10 years until the reality of her complicity with the obstetric system and the harm. What?
Obstetric.
Okay, thank you. And the harms that it does to women and babies prompted her to find a better way. In aligning with free birth, Emilee's dharmic path became clear. She quickly evolved into a radical birth keeper who serves women birthing outside the system. She founded Freebirth Society prior to the conscious conception of her first child and went to give birth to her daughter freely on Maui, Hawaii. Emilee's acclaimed podcast, the Freebirth Society podcast, quickly became a fan favorite and has reached millions of people. The Freebirth Society private membership has become a bastion of birth, freedom, truth, and community in a world in which women's birth choices are increasingly curtailed. Wow, I'm so excited to talk to you about this. Freebirth is kind of a big deal on the planet right now and pretty radical when you think about just the way that the structures are set up for us all to live inside of right now.
Yes, and at the same time, you know, what is radical? The etymology of radical is returning to roots. So it is exactly that. It is radical in the return of the most normal birth that we've ever had as mammals, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I remember I've studied some birth for a while, and I remember coming across the hypnobirthing method and reading about how that author's observation of the way that a cat gives birth and how that's seemingly so natural for the cat, and how that changed her perspective on giving birth and the need to really just consciously relax the body and trust it to do its natural process. That was really kind of profound for me to read that, and it just made total sense. So
right. And a lot of women have that realization. I had a podcast guest on this season who literally was pregnant and watched her cat give birth, and that light bulb moment, it's the title of the episode if anyone wants to go check it out. She said, if the cat can do it, so can I. And it was that simple. And then she went on to she's from Vietnam, and she went on to go to Mexico to have a free birth outside under a tree. So yeah, I mean, really, you know, when in doubt, turn to nature. When in doubt, turn to our biology. When in doubt, turn to our ancestors. And there is so much being shown to us all the time, you know, if we're willing to look.
Definitely. I would love to hear some about, so are you the mother of one child, or have you had more since then?
One that is here. Yeah.
And did you do that on Maui?
I birthed my daughter on Maui. Yeah.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. How was the experience for you?
Oh my gosh. It was incredible. I had always, since I was a little girl, my father moved to Maui when I was like maybe 12, 13. And so the first time I went there, there's like a story in our family that apparently I got off the airplane and I was in the, you know, OGG airport. And apparently I looked around and I was like, my child will be born here. So I don't know. I don't remember saying that, but I do know that my whole life I've had this kind of seed planted. I have spent a lot of time in Hawaii, and it just always occurred to me. And I mean, duh, if anyone's been there, they know what I'm talking about. That it's just such a healing place. There's something really, really, really special about it. And so it always stuck in my mind. And then I kind of had created this dream that, you know, when the time is right, I wanted to birth on Hawaii, but really more than anything, it was about postpartum on Maui, because there was something so specifically, just nurturing about the idea of being in this sacred land, you know, for the postpartum time. And so the short version is then when I left my doula business in LA, and we went through our conscious conception journey, and we really like created a 5-year plan to get to the point where we could save enough money to actualize this dream. And so shifted a lot of different ways, and eventually it manifested in us. My partner had a job that worked out perfectly with our conception, where the job ended right when I was 35 weeks. And so he got a payout for that work. And so then we got to go and rent a spot up in Pukalani, up country, and this beautiful place that could see the volcano Haleakala right above us in our kitchen window, and see the oceans and the West Maui Mountains. And we moved in on New Year's Day. And I was like maybe 36, 37 weeks pregnant, and we just chilled out and did everything we wanted, and just spent so much time together. And to me, that was really what was needed to prepare for the kind of birth experience and postpartum experience I wanted to align with. But the actual birth, as always, surprised me. It was much longer than I thought it was going to be. So there's typically, with first time moms, there's typically, and I say this totally lovingly, there often is a little bit of arrogance in how it's going to go. And it will be how it's going to go, but it will also be so much more than that, right? So there's my business partner, Yolanda Norris Clark, has this beautiful quote that is, "Birth will decimate you, and that's one of its greatest gifts." And I love that. I love that. And the whole reframing of like, yes, decimate me. That's not a bad thing. That's the work, right? So yes. I had a very long birth. It was 52 hours and of like real hard working. And it was quite the journey. That was my blind spot. And that was my like piece to untangle and learn in that birth. And it was beautiful, and I really wouldn't change a thing. I have a 2-part episode in my maybe my first season of my podcast, where I tell the whole story, because there is a bit of a cliffhanger in it, because at hour 48, I made up a story that perhaps I had a swollen cervix, and maybe that was why this was taking so damn long. And it was a free birth, so it was just me and my partner and my sister and a girlfriend. And so part of my working out my programming of attending hundreds of births in the hospital, and having only ever seen long labors be pathologized, I unconsciously was pathologizing my long labor. So so I transferred myself and went into the hospital at like 2 or 3 a.m. under the lunar eclipse, blood super moon. It was so insane. And the short version, it's a really epic story, but the short version is I went in, and I know L&D, labor and delivery, like the back of my hand. I've spent 10 years attending births and in the system. So on the one hand, I was like warrior, like I know how to play this system. And on the other hand, I was devastated and also in transition. So it was really a crazy experience. I was only there for about 50 minutes. But I went in, I got my vaginal exam. Now I realize how much I didn't need that. And really, if I could have had a wise woman with me to just say, "Oh, sweetheart, this is it." Like this you feeling upside down and disoriented is perfect, and I didn't have that. And that is a very real downside to first time mamas free birthing. And we can get into that too, because that's a whole nother conversation that's really interesting, and why we launched our Radical Birthkeeper School, because I'm completely devoted to doing what I can to train women who want to authentically serve other women in birth outside the system. So those do really go together. But anyway, so I got my exam and I was complete, and the doctor says, "Well, okay, it's time to deliver your baby now." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And I like snapped out of it, and I was like, "I need to stand up." And she was like, "Oh no, sweetie, I don't think you understand. it's time for me to deliver your baby. And I was like, I don't think you understand. I need to stand up. And so my husband helped me like stand up because I'm like on my back, you know, and I stand up and I was just like, thank you so much. I totally got what I came for. I'm in a decline being admitted and I'm happy to sign an AMA for you, but you need to do it fast because I'm going to go home and have my baby. And once I knew that like I had made up the story of the swollen cervix, and got that little piece of validation, I was totally back on top and totally like ready to go. And so that was a hoot because everyone was just like jaw dropped, you know? Yeah. And I was like wearing this like oversized t-shirt and flip-flops with no underwear, and you know my baby is in my freaking yoni, and I'm like pacing the nurse's station waiting for the doctor to finish writing the AMA. And which basically, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know what an AMA is, it's basically saying I acknowledge I could kill my baby and I will not sue the hospital, right? Like some variation of that, which is intense. But I'm all about taking responsibility. And so, yeah, I'm pacing like a wild tiger and I'm like, and just like, yeah, it was amazing. And then the funniest part is we're trying to get out of the hospital. And, you know, for anyone who's been in a hospital, they know it's pretty confusing, right? Like the whole setup is just like, you never know where to go or where the hospital exits are. We hadn't paid attention when we got brought in. And so we were trying to leave and it was actually at nurse changeover shift time. And so I'm leaving L&D, pushing, swaddling, holding hands with my partner, and all these staff people were like, oh, no, it's that way, go that way. And we're like, no, we're escaping. And so it was quite, I mean, way more disruptive than I would have, envisioned. Yeah, definitely can't claim to have had an undisturbed birth. I didn't, because I totally disturbed it myself. But yeah, then I went home and my sister raced us, you know, from Kahului back up country to our house, and we just waddled up and the moon was back out and it was this beautiful bright full moon again, and reset the house and relit the candles, and we all said a prayer and just, I told my baby I was sorry that we just did that, but here we are and we're back and you're good to go, and I've cleared out my doubt and fear, and let's do this, sweetheart. And she emerged about 40 minutes later. And I guess the last thing I want to say about that is, in my days postpartum, I cried so many tears of knowing what would have happened to me if I had stayed, and what would have happened to my daughter if I had stayed, because my daughter was born with a lot of meconium. My daughter was born, her head was born and her body did not emerge for 11 minutes, which is unheard of in the system. And she was born incredibly floppy, not gray, not as dramatic as gray, but like pretty pale and floppy and gurgly. And I knew she was fine, and she was, and she totally cleared it out, and no one interrupted us, and it was just me and my baby, and everyone was totally reverent. And I share that because there was so much so much empathy and just sadness for knowing exactly what would have happened to us, which is, if anyone doesn't know, they would have seen the presence of mech if I had stayed. And a pediatrics team, a NICU team would have been present in the room. I wouldn't be allowed to decline that. So there'd be like 9 to 10 people staring at my vagina as I pushed my baby on my back with lights on me. And then when my baby came out, if I hadn't been cut, which I would have been, because there was an 11-minute space between her head and her body, and who knows what it would have been, you know, in those circumstances too, it might have even taken longer because I would have been so observed and disrupted. So I very likely would have been cut with an episiotomy, which is so brutal and abusive. And then the baby would have been cut from me, you know, her cord, her lifeline, her blood infusion that was intended to go to her would have been cut. and she would have been taken to the warmer and vigorously assessed. She would have been deep suctioned with tubes going up her nose and through her mouth and suctioning out her tummy and all of this really intense stuff. That's all protocol. And then, if the baby was to have been given back to me, which I also don't know if that would have happened, it would have happened while they were manually removing my placenta, because side note, that took 2.5 hours to come out, which is all normal, right? So just knowing that, and that I didn't have that, and I got exactly what was biologically in alignment and what was truly best for my baby and I, just wow, it was so, it was a big birth. It was very big, very transformational, very beautiful. I wouldn't change a thing. Very humbling, and I'm really proud of it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I felt like I was right along the journey with you.
Yeah, you guys got to go listen to the 2-part episode, because it's like 2 hours of explaining everything I learned, and it's
Wow.
a good one.
I'm so glad that you made a podcast, and I can only imagine what lessons that whole experience served you. And thank goodness that you already had 10 years of experience, being for other women's births, because it's such a vulnerable time for a woman when she's giving birth, and especially for the first time, and doesn't necessarily know, her body doesn't necessarily know the way to do it. And
no, her body totally does know how to do it. Actually, she
right.
Totally
The
knows how to do it. I think you might have meant like her body actually does know, but the analytical brain, who has no relationship to normal physiological birth in this culture, is quite self-sabotaging.
Yes. Okay. So maybe that's what I meant. I know that for women, it's very common for them to have a long labor for their first child, and then it's like they get the hang of it, and it gets easier.
No, I wouldn't say it gets easier. I wouldn't use that word, but I think we also have to look at, what does it mean to say long, right? So there's averages that say that the first time mom averages 24 hours. Where is that data coming from? How big of a sample size? What defines labor? I don't know. I don't know. In my experience, and I think many birth keepers would agree, yes, a first time mama is going to take some time. 3 days is a normal amount of time for a woman to be in labor. And then the second birth, the body's kind of already primed. The cervix is already opened, the pelvis is already opened, and the mother, know better, do better, might have set herself up better. She also now probably has a little one that is distracting her in early labor, and there's just so many variables to kind of what creates this formula. But I wouldn't say easier. And I wouldn't say you're more vulnerable in the first birth. I would say you are equally vulnerable, because if you think of us again as animals, which of course we are, and we really like to pretend that we're different than that. What do we know about animals in the wild? Like you referenced cats earlier. And we know that if a zebra mama in labor is, trying to find a place to relax, and she's, in some bushes, and she's dilating, and her baby zebra is coming, if she even catches a pride of lions in her, peripheral, even if they don't see her, just that shot of adrenaline and cortisol is going to shift her whole system into fight or flight, right? Which is so interesting too, because I don't know, I can't speak globally, but I would say in North America, we're really committed to a fight or flight life, right? Like wake up stressed out, check your phone, drink some coffee, get in the car, go to traffic. Like we're really committed to, not every single one of us, but that's like the culture, right? So even to talk about this stuff, I find kind of to be kind of interesting, because it's like we have to get really back to the basics of so much of this stuff, and really understanding how influenced we are by our hormones and our basic systems that are largely shared with all other mammals. So just that zebra idea. So if she sees a pride of lions, she switches into fight or flight. She can actually suck her baby back up and undilate, what's the right word, she can basically go back to normal until she can and retrieve from labor, and then go find another place, and it will take her hours and hours and hours to switch back into oxytocin and relaxation, safety. And there are core ingredients that we all as mammals need in order to experience that kind of safety and oxytocin. So the core things are to be unobserved, darkness, a sense of safety. And right there is completely contradictory to any hospital experience. Right? I don't care if they're willing to lower the lights for a couple hours. No, you have a bunch of strangers in there. They're asking you questions. They're keeping you in your cerebral, you can't drop down into theta, and you just can't do the normal physiological hormonal blueprint that is intended. Yeah, it's a trip.
You are filled with lots of value about this to share. So I'm wondering then, like, what are some of the ways that you help empower women to feel confident in their ability to birth not in a hospital? Because I think for a lot of women that's kind of a big deal. But then again, there's also women that I know for sure that they want to have a home birth. So I guess I'm just wondering from the perspective of a woman who is more so curious about this and not like 100% confident, but is like, wow, this is an option. Like, what do you do if you're kind of new to this and it sounds interesting?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say almost no one is 100% confident, because, and I want to like just kind of erase that anyone should be, or that if you're not, that's like inappropriate or something, because the truth is that we as the creators, and the bringers of life and death, we as those instruments of life are actually stepping into a co-creative mystery, right? So from the moment of conception, that spark of life is going to die at some point, right? It could be a week later. It could be, God forbid, a year later. It could be 85 years later. We don't know. But as soon as there's a spark of life, there's an end, because it's cyclical, right? Life and death go together, birth, rebirth, death, all of it, cycle, nature, everything we already know, right? And so I think that's important, because I think that there's something in that I find a lot of freedom in and a lot of relaxation around, that we don't have to be fearless. How could you be fearless as egotistical humans when we're stepping into the greatest mystery and participating actively with our freaking bodies in the greatest mystery that literally exists in our consciousness, right? Which is life and death. So how could you be 100% confident? And what does that even mean, right? We don't know how it's going to go. We just don't. We don't know if our baby will survive. We can't. We literally can't know that. We don't know how it's going to go. And so that to me is the work. That to me is the most compelling, powerful work of a wild pregnancy and a free birth. And it's not to say that can't happen in other choices. Of course it can. I don't think that we really get out of the work as women, even women who choose not to have children. We're still instruments of life. We still have cycles. We still have to contend with pregnancy, even if the way we're hoping to contend with it is to not have it, right? We are still in that magic all the time. Anyway, so how I also just wanted to say, because I have a thing around the word empower, I don't empower anybody. I don't think that that's possible. And I think that we are powerful, and it's really everyone's own individual journey to claim and discover what that looks like for them, right? So I kind of think of it more as like, I'm doing my work to feel powerful and clear. And that is pretty darn contagious, right? That feels good for other women who are like, ooh, what's that like? You know, like you don't use hormonal birth control, but you know how to not get pregnant. Tell me more, right? Or, you know, whatever. So many, you know, you don't need to go to the hospital to birth. What is that about? So I want to also just say, I think a really important piece here, because I think as females, we're really confused about this in our culture. And then definitely birth workers kind of on another layer. I also am not interested in convincing anyone of anything. So I have no agenda for a woman to not go to the hospital. Or I should say that's my goal.
Right.
That's my work, is to not hold that agenda, because I don't think you can say I trust women and judge their choices. Right. And I struggle with that. I'm not saying I've transcended that. I'm very judgmental. And my judgment, like many people, is rooted in this kind of like, well, I know what's right for you. Like, I know, you know, whatever. We all do this with people, right? So I feel like more of my work is to be really responsible about that, and to really check myself when I'm with a woman prenatally, and when I'm hearing them, and when they, I mean, the truth is, the way I've established myself in the world, I'm not seeking people out to work with, you know, people are seeking me out. And so that kind of vetting process has already happened with what I've created. So women are coming to me because they're already enlivened by what I'm talking about or doing. So that kind of makes it easy but to answer your question more specifically, I mean, I have certain tools I work with. I have obviously a certain spin on how I teach radical childbirth education that I think is, it really, Yolanda and I were just talking about this in our webinar yesterday, really part of our job as a embodied birth worker is to learn the craft of relaying how much we love birth. Because what that does to another woman is it validates that little whisper in their head that maybe they love it too. You know, but they've never heard anyone say that before. I mean, have you ever heard a woman say, I love giving birth? Right?
No.
Right. And so that's something we take really seriously. I've only done it one time. My partner's done it 8 times. So she has a little bit more street cred to say that she loves giving birth, but she says it all the time. And just how profound that is to hear from a big sister, you know, or a teacher, you know, that I love giving birth. And it's not because it's easy. It's because it decimates me every time. And just the spin of that and what that can do for our own, you know, relationship with pain, relationship with shame, relationship with boundaries. I mean, it's just there's no ceiling to where this can go. So I think that's a big part of it, is really having found a way to craft our true love of women, birth, and all that goes between that, and the power of that. Yeah, I think it really validates the women who want that validated, you know, that for most women I've ever met, there is this whisper of like, maybe it could be a beautiful thing. Maybe it doesn't have to be full of men fingering me and giving me drugs and cutting me open. You know, like, this isn't rocket science. Like, that's an appropriate thing to think, that maybe it could be a gentle, loving, respectful experience, just like sex. You know, and I feel often like we can't talk about this without talking about rape culture, because in rape culture, women aren't expected to be centered, to be honored, to give consent, to have orgasms, to enjoy sex, you know, any of this stuff. And so I often compare the two, because sexual assault and birth abuse is very similar. In a way, I would say it's actually the same. It's a violation of the same areas, right? Just maybe a different environment, like literally, but.
And more normal.
I mean, I don't know. They're both pretty darn normalized, you know? I would say that, yeah, I'd say that I almost don't know if we could untangle them, because the normalization of one perpetuates the other, right? Almost every woman has birth trauma, and almost every woman has sexual trauma.
Oh,
right?
Man.
So here we are. And so to talk about how birth can be gentle and loving and woman-centered also then mirrors that sex can be gentle and loving and woman-centered. And they really go together in a powerful way, because sex and birth can break a woman, right? Can just break a woman if they are violated. And sex and birth can be the most powerful transformation available to us if it's, self perpetuated, in power and in reverence and all of the things that we know that we need.
Definitely. I think that trauma and the birth experience for a woman giving birth, because I know that there's a lot of women who have a certain vision of the birth that they would like to have, and oftentimes that ends up not going the way that they want it to, and there ends up being a bunch of unwanted medical intervention, and it's very damaging and heartbreaking to the woman. And I guess I just kind of want to hear a little bit of like a message of hope for women, especially if they're, gonna have another baby, that there's a chance that they could still have the birth experience that they want, and kind of like liberate themselves from, do you know what I mean?
Of course, yes. I mean, it's the entire mission of my company. And I think the first thing I need to start with saying is there's a huge difference between wanting something and committing to it. Okay. So there's a really big difference. I could say, I do say, I want to exercise every day. Do I do that? No. Am I committed to that? Am I, committing to the steps needed in my life to create the time to do that? You see what I mean? So a lot of women say, I want a natural birth, but their actions don't align with what they say that they want. So I'm calling this out totally lovingly, because I understand it's a very complicated thing, because we want natural births, but we've also been programmed for 3 generations to be terrified of ourselves, our bodies, and to not be centered in any way in our culture to take responsibility. So to me, free birth really largely is around highlighting the tenets of the discovery of self-responsibility. So you can't do that in the system. It's already done to you, right? And everything in there is counterproductive to a natural birth. So I guess the message of hope is that, first of all, I think it's important to think on that everything you do is a choice. And if you don't know that yet, start considering that. Because until you can fully understand and accept that everything you do is a choice, you're going to continue living in a state of victim consciousness that you have been socialized to live in, right? So there's to me consciousness, victim consciousness. Things are just happening to me. I, say I want a natural birth, and then I go to the hospital, and then all this horrible stuff happens to me. Okay. The other option is to learn how to shift, and this is largely what my coaching is about, learn how to shift into a through me and by me consciousness. So I am co-creating my reality. Now, what does that actually mean? So if a woman, let's say, wants to have a home birth, and so she chooses a hospital midwife, which happens all the time, particularly in Australia, to come be her home birth midwife. And then the hospital midwife transfers her after a couple of hours, which happens all the time. A woman could look at that and take responsibility for how she co-created that transfer, for example. Gosh, so many things. There's so many layers here. And so that's not at all to deny how bullied women are into interventions and C-sections and all of that. But I'm kind of going a step back to go, hold on, you're actually first making the choice to engage in the system, right? Because if you really get down to the brass tacks, if you have a home, and I understand not everyone does, but if you have a home, you are actually making the choice to leave it, right? Because you start your labor. Everyone starts their labor at home, right? That's where they live. unless they're outside or something, or I have one friend that almost gave birth at a Trader Joe's in California because that's where she started her labor and it was very fast. But anyway, you know, so you start your labor at home. So it's actually a choice to get dressed, get up your bag, get in the car and head over there. Right. And so I guess kind of what I challenge is own your choices. And you don't go to McDonald's and ask for an organic local salad. You don't go to a hospital and ask for a natural birth. That's not what they deliver. And we need to start getting in alignment with reality. Right? I don't think we need to reform the hospital system. I think we need to completely put it in the place where it's most appropriate, which is for emergencies.
Yes.
Right? And I would never deny I'm not grateful for that. Of course I am. Absolutely. And I also understand that there's complexity here around privilege and, you know, women of color being more, obviously discriminated against and might be more, or probably will be more scrutinized in the system. So it's complicated. We don't have time to get into every single layer of this. But it really does start with, what are you co-creating? Are you willing to see your life as that? Because that's when you start to create your power. That's when you start to connect to your power. And so usually what I do with women, and so an exercise I'll leave with your listeners, is the first step is, what's your dream birth? Write it down, spend time with it. And so a prompt is, you know, if you were 8 weeks postpartum and you were to tell me your birth story, what would you want to say? What would you want to say? Was it under a full moon outside with only your lover, and maybe your best friend was inside making a casserole for whatever, you know, like, what is it? What is the biggest dream you could possibly dream about your birth story? And get that figured out. With beyond the healthy baby, duh, that's all assumed in a dream birth. So then what happens? What food is there? What music is there? What people are there? Where are you? What time of day? What position are you in when your baby emerges? How does your placenta come out? Blah, 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 blah. So once you have that, you've created your North Star. You've created a compass. So now the question is, are you willing to have that? Because if your dream is to birth under the full moon in your backyard with your lover and your best friends in the kitchen making soup, but when you go into labor, you go to the hospital, well, that's totally incongruent. So are you willing to take responsibility for that? Right?
Yeah.
And so to me, that's really what excites me about Freebirth so much, because it is a way, not the only way, but it is a pretty big way that women are doing that, and that women are going, no, I don't need some stranger in a coat acting like he knows my body better than me and doing a bunch of tests I don't even understand that, oh, by the way, aren't even evidence-based. You know, I'd way rather just walk in the woods and sleep and eat good food and connect with my friends. And if I have a loving sister, maybe I'm going to invite her to touch my belly. And, you know, that, you know, to me, that's a wild pregnancy. It's an integrated element of your life, right? And then what is Freebirth? Freebirth, if this wasn't clear by now, is just, it's a family birth. It's staying at home and birthing in the absence of hired medical providers, in the absence of hired authorities. And so therefore, you are truly the center of your experience. That doesn't mean that people who love you can't be there. It doesn't mean you're alone. Some people think that. That's not what it is at all.
It's good that you clarify that. And I really love your emphasis on really being responsible for your own life and your choices, because I think that is probably one of the most important pieces, which is why you shared it.
Yeah.
And
you want to talk about it. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, your responsibility in also how you move through the pregnancy and your choices on how you care for yourself and support your body. You know, like you could make healthier choices.
Exactly.
Or you could not.
And right. And part of the taking responsibility, to my mind, is like navigating the consequences of when you don't. Right. So if you are super unhealthy heading into your pregnancy and continue to be unhealthy and don't take responsibility for your health, and it might be because you don't know how to. So I'm not I'm not villainizing anyone that
Sure.
experiences this. You know, we're not taught this stuff. So
Right.
there's that. But then, yeah, you might get a pregnancy condition. You might get choleostasis, or you might get, you know, HELP syndrome, or what's the other one? Oh my God. Preeclampsia. I mean, there's a lot, but yeah, you might get something, but it's not random, you know, and again, this can get tricky to talk about because it could be perceived as if I'm blaming, and it's really not at all what I'm doing. I'm really just talking about like the reality that people who learn how and have access to and figure out how to take full responsibility for their health, have better health outcomes. Now, again, there are racial disparities here. There are access problems here. There are, you know, concrete food, you know, what are they called? Concrete food jungles, you know, in you know, lots of major cities where marginalized communities can't access this kind of stuff. So it's a complicated topic, you know, and there's a lot to this, but kind of getting beyond the social aspects of it, just kind of the facts remain that better health, you know, is going to provide a better biological experience. And so that's one example of taking responsibility. I mean, another one could just be, I mean, this happens all the time, where a woman maybe had a C-section, doesn't really think she needed it. She probably for sure didn't. And then she maybe finds a new doctor because she's like, I'm going to have that VBAC. And then halfway through the pregnancy, the new doctor says something like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let me think of something I've heard recently. Yeah. We'll totally VBAC you. Like, yeah, we'll totally just see how it goes. You know, but okay, here's one that I recently heard, but it's also not so bad to save your vagina. Okay, so that's a pretty extreme red flag, but I hear these kind of things all the time from women. And so I would say that for a woman to take total responsibility of her VBAC, she would really need to respond to the information she just got, that this douchebag does not have her back whatsoever, right? And I mean, there's so much to this that women don't know, but there are some hospitals where doctors actually get paid more if they do surgery on them, you know? So there's so much to this that, you know, could kind of flow into this conversation of how to take responsibility. But I think for starters, it's around identifying your dream and seeing what are you doing to create that. Right. And that can be applied to your job. That could be applied to your relationship, to where you live. I mean, it's not obviously not just about birth.
Yeah. Yep. I think that everybody could use a good reminder of really being responsible for their own life, because I think that we're kind of like bred into that victim mentality, and it requires a good amount of work to reprogram your mind to really believe that you have, like, you know, you're responsible for your experiences. And
you are, as soon as you are, right? Like, as soon as you realize you are, it's done. And so I think giving ourselves a lot of compassion for the reality that we are socialized under patriarchal reign. And so we are an oppressed class as females. And I actually think that it's really powerful to understand that and to really lean into, you know, the education around that, of like, what does it mean to live in a world where we as females are seen, treated, experienced, and very strategically placed as less than males. And so, you know, global female oppression is, in my opinion, the biggest problem on the entire planet, because if we didn't have that, I think the whole world would totally heal. We wouldn't be raping our world. We wouldn't be, you know, doing all the stuff that's happening. And so I actually find it very powerful to learn about my own oppression, because then that helps me kind of decide how I want to organize around it. And I actually, like, how do I put this? Like, I accept reality. And because of that, I'm not being complicit in my own oppression anymore. Right. But like, I had to accept the truth first. And then I found power in that and was like, all right, let's go. And yes, I do believe women birthing in power and women living autonomous lives and women centering themselves in their households and women learning about what matriarchal societies used to be like and women, claiming their space and women allying and women leading and gathering in circles and women speaking with each other. This is how we stop this. This is how we rise. And it's not a rise and a takeover. This is another thing that really drives me nuts, that most people have no understanding of patriarchy or matriarchy. And so they think that a matriarchal reign would just be women doing the same thing to men that men are doing to us. Like we would be raping everybody and we would be like imprisoning everybody. Like, come on, do you really not trust women at all? Like, how revealing of your own internalized misogyny that you don't trust that women would do this way better and way more loving, right? We're the mothers, my God. And so, yeah, that's one of my favorite topics, actually.
Definitely. I love how passionate you are about all of this. I just wanted to add that before I really even came across the term free birth, well, I just realized that is how I was birthed. My mother free birthed me on the Big Island of Hawaii by the volcano.
God. Who all was there?
She was completely alone.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
was that like a sad thing or a happy thing?
It wasn't planned, but I don't know, like my birth father just happened to not conveniently not be there while I was coming out. So she ended up being alone, and I was like more than 10 pounds and a very big baby. But we survived.
Wow. And everything was fine. She stayed home. She didn't transfer once you got there?
No. Well, my dad was really super non-traditional, and I don't even think he wanted me to have a birth certificate or a social security number. Mm-hmm. But I ended up getting one filled out a few days after I was born. But
I should interview your mom for the podcast.
Oh, you totally should.
That'd be awesome. I want older women on the podcast because what a cool special voice that is, to kind of show how this has been happening for much longer than just the last 2 years.
Yeah, honestly, I've been wanting her to write a book to share my birthing story because it's such a beautiful story. They went over there and originally wanted to have me in a hot pond on the Big
That's so cute.
Right? And that's not exactly what happened, but I'm glad that I made it anyways. And
the first birth that I witnessed was on the Big Island.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was the birth of my little sister.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Did you know about the birthing center there that offers dolphin-assisted births?
Mm-mm.
I don't know what the stature of it is, but I learned about it many years ago because I used to want to be a midwife, and I've been really passionate about natural pregnancy and birth for a long time. So there's a whole thing about the effect that dolphins have when present for a birth on the mother and also the development of the baby, and it's all really quite amazing.
The birth of my little sister, the night prior to her emergence, the mom's waters opened and we went on the boat in the middle of the night, and all the spinner dolphins were jumping up and speaking to the belly and my older sister and I were swimming in the ocean. And then the next day, the house that my dad had rented was on, I always pronounce it wrong, Kalakalua Bay. How do you say it?
Oh, I'd have to see the word. Yeah, but it's okay. Nobody's judging your pronunciation.
Yeah, but so that's where they say that the dolphins pop in and out of reality, and there's tons of spinner dolphins in this bay, and that was my dad had a house on that bay, and so my dad's wife at the time birthed outside on the bay, and literally dolphins were super present. They were jumping and they were totally present. She was on the grass, but definitely felt that energy for sure.
That's so awesome. Wow, what a dream to have a midwife dolphin.
Totally.
Okay. So, wow, I'm really grateful that we were able to connect with this. I'm super excited to share this with everyone. So before we get off, I would love for you to just share with us, for anybody who is interested in connecting with you more, learning from you, what sort of things you offer.
Yeah, so pretty much everything is on our site, freebirthsociety.com. We have a private membership that is vetted. So you actually apply to join the membership. It's on a proprietary network off of Facebook, off of Instagram. That is really, really wonderful. So it's a safe space to talk about these kind of radical ideas and not be vilified on the internet. So you can apply for that on our website. The podcast that we've mentioned a couple times, it's a free resource. It's on iTunes, everywhere. It's on our website. It's on YouTube. It's on all the places. And that's just called the Freebirth Society podcast. And we have our flagship course. We have 4 different courses, and so you can check those all out at freebirthsocietycourses.com. But our flagship course is the Complete Guide to Free Birth. So that's a self-guided, enormous course that Yolanda and I created together. And so if you're feeling this and you want to learn a lot more, definitely take that course. And then the last thing I want to mention is that we are very excited because in 1 week of this recording, which I know will come out later, but we will have just begun our Radical Birth Keeper School, which is basically like a traditional midwifery school, a way to learn how to be a birth keeper with women who want to be outside the system. And we're just so thrilled. It's a real dream come true that we get to do this. So that's happening, and you can learn about that at radicalbirthkeeperschool.com. And then I also offer one-on-one coaching. All of that's on our site. I don't know, we do a lot of stuff. You can just look at it all on the website.
Definitely. Beautiful. And if I remember correctly, you guys are offering $100 off of.
Yes. So that flagship course, Complete Guide to Free Birth, it's priced at $399. And so through your link that you'll provide, you can get it for $100 off. Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And God, I'm so excited for your for the birthing of your new project. That sounds really awesome and so liberating for women. Thank you so much for doing this work and for being so unapologetic in your authenticity and your stance. I think just that alone is enough.
Thank you. We just don't have time. We gotta just blaze it, you know? Yeah, thank you.
I completely agree. And thank you so much for your time today and for sharing that story. I'm going to go have to go listen to the full 2 hours of your birth story because
it's a good one.
Sounded really awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emilee. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode. And I hope everybody has a beautiful day. Aloha.
Bye.